Ministries of Heal. This is my first year in Cincinnati, so I'm not that familiar with it. I think in Buffalo they call it the Catholic Charities of Heal, but it's for great causes. And the Archdiocese has asked us to preach on it this weekend. I don't know why they would choose this weekend. I mean, there's not anything going on, is there, in the coming days? Tomorrow's Martin Luther King Day, it's the presidential inauguration. Also, it's the beginning of Christian Unity Week. Later on in the week is the March for Life. We are in the first month of the Jubilee year with the theme Pilgrims of Hope. And it was announced, we got a letter saying we should emphasize that this is the third year of the Eucharistic revival, and we want to talk about putting love in action. So, also, this affects us very much at St. Clement with our large immigrant community. Nobody knows what's going to happen with regard to immigration policy and enforcement starting tomorrow. So, there are so many things to preach about this Sunday. So I'm not going to preach about any of those. But at the same time, in a way, I'm going to preach about all of them. Because when I was reflecting, what on earth am I going to preach on, this Sunday? A thought came to me of a phrase that's become more and more common, at least on the news feeds and websites and news sources that I follow. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this expression. It's called vibe shift. If you've heard of vibe shift, raise your hand. Okay, a good number of you have heard of that. It's an expression that was coined in 2021 by Sean Monahan. He's a 30-something writer and consultant from Los Angeles. If any of you are hockey fans, he's not to be confused with Sean Monahan, the center for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Sean Monahan. A vibe shift, you could say it's like a trend, but it's really much more than that. Like a trend could be a trend in music or a trend in fashion. For instance, all of a sudden, the sneakers that you're wearing, you realize, oh, these are no longer in style. Nobody's wearing this kind of sneaker anymore. I don't really live in that world, but that would be like a trend. But a vibe shift refers more to something bigger, something societal, something cultural. And one of the definitions of it is this gets a little wordy, but when a cultural dynamic changes, and a once dominant social wavelength starts to feel dated. It's also defined as a significant change in a prevailing cultural atmosphere. I think we can hear vibe shifts in the readings today. Isaiah, in the first reading, writes of Israel emerging out of its exile in Babylon. And he uses the image of the dawn shining forth. And that's a powerful image. Maybe not so much when you live in a city, but if you're in the desert, when the dawn breaks, it breaks forth quickly. And it was just dark, but then all of a sudden, it's light. And think of the Easter Vigil, when the church is in darkness and a light comes in with that one solitary Paschal candle. But then, as the light is shared from candle to candle to candle, rather quickly the whole church is bathed in candlelight. Now, Isaiah, he was using dramatic terms to describe a new Zion, a new Jerusalem. And he was doing that to convey a sense of hope. On the second reading, St. Paul used his own vibe shift vocabulary when he was writing to the Corinthians. In the community of followers in Corinth, there was division, improper conduct, and misunderstandings about the faith. Paul's letter was an attempt to restore the community to its foundation, Jesus Christ. And in the middle of a power struggle, Paul reminded the community that leadership was not up to just one person and their particular gift. Rather, wisdom, knowledge, faith, healing, mighty deeds, prophecy, discernment of spirits were gifts spread throughout the entire community. Paul brought about a vibe shift in Corinth by emphasizing the importance of unity in Christ and the need to live a life of holiness in the midst of cultural challenges. The gospel today depicts a major vibe shift as a result of Jesus' first miracle at the wedding of Cana. The mood moves from despair, they have no wine, which would have been a tragedy or scandal at a Jewish wedding in those days. It moved from despair to joy, with an overabundance of the best wine. So how do you know when there's a vibe shift? You can feel it. Isaiah felt it. All of a sudden, the new Israel would break forth like the dawn in the desert. The Corinthians felt it once they realized the power of the Spirit. The guests at the wedding of Cana felt it. And as John writes, Jesus' disciples began to believe in him. Now, many people believe that there's a vibe shift going on in our country and around the world right now. As one commentator said, we are in that transient end stage. The swan song of the first half of the 2020s is upon us. Another described it as cultural change, economy change, politics change. And a Christian commentator, Santiago Pliego, said, fundamentally, again this gets a little wordy, fundamentally the vibe shift is a return to a champion of reality, a rejection of the bureaucratic, the cowardly, the guilt-driven, a return to greatness, courage, and joyous ambition. The vibe shift is living not by lies and instead speaking the truth, whatever the cost. The vibe shift is directly facing our tumultuous times and choosing to build. So what does a vibe shift feel like at the local level? At St. Clement's School, one of our non-Christian teachers told me after the school mass this past week that she wanted to become Catholic. And we met for an hour after school. And I don't know if you've ever had the experience of sitting down with somebody and having them tell you how they came to Christ. It's a powerful, powerful experience. I could feel the vibe shift inside of her. And one of the reasons why I rushed in here at the last minute today is at St. Clement today we have the rite of welcoming, where she stands at the entrance to the church. And Father Al, who's presiding at the Mass here, is asking her these questions. And her answers were just so beautiful. You know, Faith, I do. And her response, will you help her? I will. Powerful, powerful moment for a parish where oftentimes we're wondering, you know, where are all, she's young, we're wondering, where are the young people? You know, how come we have such a small connection with the school? You know, she, through her faith journey, she could be like the forebearer of a vibe shift for us over there at St. Clement. I don't want to put that pressure on her, you know, but she very well could. At Mass this morning, she had invited her third grade class, so there were third graders there in the church. I'd never seen them at Mass before in 6 months. At the personal level, and I'm risking saying this because one of the friars at St. Clement, I love all the friars there, but one of them said to me after Mass, one of them said, you know, we learned that the preacher isn't supposed to talk about himself. Break that rule right here. At the personal level, my first 3 months here in Cincinnati, were the most difficult 3 months of my life. No particular day was the most difficult day, but it was the most difficult 3-month period. I was, for the most part, miserable. I was feeling so guilty about leaving Buffalo. They terminated the friar presence in Buffalo after we'd been there since 1858, and people felt so abandoned. We all felt guilty about leaving them. I missed my friends, I missed my family, I missed my whole parish. I missed the friars I had lived with for 37 years from the old Holy Name province. I missed my bicycling community. I missed authentic buffalo wings and buffalo pizza. Eating buffalo chocolate. Yes, there is such a thing as buffalo chocolate. I was napping all the time. I was complaining about just about everything. I had the blues. But that started to change in November. And a big part of it was spending a week on retreat with a small group of friars in the Arizona desert. 3 days after I came back, Father Al and Sister Therese led an amazing town hall meeting at St. Clement. And it felt like the dawn taking over the darkness. And that night was the first time since moving to Cincinnati that I slept through the night. It was a vibe shift. And at St. Clement, I can sense it. I feel like St. Paul. I feel that now I can recognize the gifts of the Spirit in so many people. I feel like we're so ready for water to turn into wine. And at the level of the friars, we might also sense a vibe shift happening. Now it's true we are withdrawing from places where we've been since we first arrived in the United States. And right here, we're just a few feet away from basically an empty mother house. Yet this past week, some 200 friars and lay people met in Kansas City. And I don't know if, I imagine some of you might have been in Kansas City this past week for what we called our Franciscan, our provincial synod. And I wasn't there, but the 3 most common words that they put on the internet, they have one of those big word blog kind of things where you put on your phone, what word describes your mood, and they tabulated them all. The 3 most common words used to describe it were hopeful, inspiring, and encouraging. And even though the term vibe shift didn't make it onto that list of 300 or so words, I hope it was implicit in those words. So we now continue with this liturgy of the Eucharist. And let's celebrate it because really for a Christian, it's the greatest vibe shift of all time. Where the social wavelength of Holy Thursday and Good Friday gives way to Easter Sunday.